owned media, we know is important in today's world. LinkedIn could disappear. TikTok could disappear. What about all those audiences that you have? I mean, yeah, you could build an email list, but owned media is still like where it's at in today's world. And so part of TACK, we were like, we want to build a media network ultimately.
This is The Anonymous Marketer, a podcast where we tackle the biggest questions from the B2B marketing community. But instead of bringing on guests for a quick chat, every question comes from an anonymous source. These are the questions B2B marketers have but are afraid to ask. Let's start the conversation.
Hey, I'm Nick Bennett, and I'm excited to get into this episode and dive into some of the new anonymous questions that we received. But before we get into it, I wanted to do my part and highlight our supporters. As a tech marketer, do you know which paid media platform brings in the highest ROI? If you don't know which platform sets you up for faster, more cost-efficient growth, then you're skipping the first step to securing more customers. You won't be able to attract, convert, and retain customers to ramp up revenue. That's why Directive developed The Verdict, a game-changing benchmark and data report from the performance marketing agency for tech brands. In this report, you'll discover which paid media platforms bring in the highest ROI so you can optimize your sales and marketing strategies. The Verdict report gives you valuable insights from over $150 million in ad spend from the top paid media platforms used for tech companies. Platforms like Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, Bing, and Capterra. The report dives deep into key metrics from lead to customer for each platform and shares powerful strategies for how you can generate the greatest ROI for your tech company. You'll also learn about how Directive views the difference between marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads, opportunity metrics, and customer acquisition costs. Don't only rely on your company's data of one. Take advantage of industry-wide insights to truly understand the paid media trends that impact your bottom line. Check out The Verdict today at directiveconsulting.com/Nick.
So Nick, before we get into what you're doing next, I want to start with your experience as a podcast host. I think over the last 3.5+ years, you've hosted at least, and I say at least because there have been some overlapping times, but at least one show at all times. It started years ago. We were in the Rev Genius community. You posted a question in the marketing channel. You're like, when? Because there was some good banter back and forth. And you're like, when are we going to start a Rev Genius podcast? We started podcasting then. And there was Rep Your Brand. And then there was Rep Your Brand plus Real ABM, which was kind of like a release, like a season. And then we pivoted Rep Your Brand into the Anonymous Marketer. So I guess just to start, why do you keep podcasting?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a creative outlet. Like, I just love spending time meeting new people. It's like, you know, they always talk about how do you use podcasting as like an ABM strategy, or how do you build relationships with people? It's like you bring people on that you want to learn from. And I think, you know, going back to like Rep Your Brand, it was like, you know, when you have people like Justin Welsh and Dave Gerhardt and Chris Walker on, it's like you can pick their brain for a solid 30 to 45 minutes of like, hey, I can go implement this stuff in my day to day if I want to build my personal brand at the time, or like if I want to build an audience or whatever that is. Like, you can tailor these conversations to maximize your output as like a host to figure out how to benefit like your life as well as all of the listeners. So
yeah, I love that kind of window into it. I'm actually launching a new podcast myself. Tristan and I ran recorded content for years. And as our business has expanded its service offerings, one of the things that I really wanted to do, especially because, you know, and Nick, I don't know how much of this you even know, but like Tristan and I do a lot of the sales, and Tristan builds a lot of the stuff on the back end. So he gets his hands very dirty a lot of the times, and I'm more on the early side with the client. And for me, one of the real big reasons I wanted to launch a podcast is I'm having conversations with people constantly about what they should do, right? But then I'm not doing the work necessarily on the back end at all times. I want to be out there learning from the people doing the work. So one of my biggest reasons that I wanted to launch a podcast was for my own selfish educational purposes. I get to go out there, talk to whoever I want to talk to, whether it's someone in ABM or someone who's an SEO specialist, or someone who's doing a bunch of paid media and for a B2B technology company, and they have X budget, and I get to ask them questions about other things that they're doing, what successes are they seeing, etc. So it's a really nice outlet for me to be able to continue my ongoing education, and then hopefully the audience gains some of the same or similar takeaways.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, education's the name of the game, right? I feel like as long as you can educate people and give value, they're always going to be coming back. One, you're going to stay top of mind for whenever they may need you or whatever, for whatever it is that you do. But two, it's just you're a genuine, like, nice human being as well.
Yeah. And Nick, I know we pivoted from Rep Your Brand to Anonymous Marketer. We talked a little bit about, how you were going through this interview style, right? With Rep Your Brand, and you were trying to understand how people were out there and sharing information about their personal experiences and so forth. But you got to a point where you wanted to pivot the show, and it kind of had reached that point to where you didn't feel like you were learning as much. And so with that mindset, we pivoted to Anonymous Marketer that had a completely different format. And I'm wondering, like, how do you think that approach compares to what some of the other podcasts that you've done? Like, how does it compare answering anonymous questions versus having a dialogue with someone on the other end?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's different and it's unique. I was listening to sports radio this morning, and like they were actually making fun of like podcasts because they were like, and if you follow like Boston sports radio, those people are ruthless, but they were like ripping, like everyone has a podcast. Hey, people are having podcasts and then inviting other people on to promote their own podcast. And they're like, it's one big like ring of people talking about podcasts, but it's all like everyone usually has a very similar like interview style type of podcast. But the anonymous piece I thought was super interesting because if you think about it, everyone turned to communities back when COVID happened. And communities popped up everywhere. Rev Genius, Peak, like all Pavilion, all these different types of communities. Now, the issue is that communities flooded and all your colleagues, your peers were also in these communities down the road. So you no longer felt like it was a safe space to ask questions to people. And that's why I was like, this is brilliant because people still have these questions, but now they have no one to turn to. And it was an amazing place. I mean, when we launched the forum, like, we got like 70 anonymous questions, like pretty much like within the first week or so. And it goes to show like, hey, there is a much needed place for people to ask questions without feeling judged.
Yeah. And what worked well, you mentioned, we had like this flood of initial questions that came in. What worked well about the anonymous nature of those questions compared to when someone's asking you on a podcast?
I think it's just, we asked the ability to get like, what company size, marketing team size, industry. It just helps level set where people are when they're listening to the show. Are they comparative in like nature to like the business? And some of the topics, it just doesn't matter. Like layoffs, for example, anyone in tech can relate to layoffs in today's world. But like when you're getting into SEO, that was it. I just talked about that episode the other day. Like someone was like, I love that episode. I got so much insight from it. And because I'm an early stage startup with a small budget, now take that same strategy and replicate it to Google, for example, it's not going to work. So that's why like, I think another piece of it was like, so genius was because people could relate to where they were in their both personal and professional journey.
Yeah. I feel like though, there's probably a more challenging aspect as well, right? With the questions. What did you find that you had to navigate a little differently compared to a more traditional interview type show?
Yeah, I think it was more of just figuring out the way to not like there was no right or wrong answer, but like when I had guests on, it was more about sharing their experiences. And like it's a little bit tougher because when you're asking a very strict set of like questions, it's like it's either a yes or a no or somewhere in between. There's no gray area. Whereas like these anonymous questions, it's like, hey, you could do this, you could do this, like this might not be the right way. But it's tough to balance that because like I've never done that style of show before or like even participated in that type of show. So like when I was developing what the actual like show flow or notes or questions looked like, it was very much tailored to that person, but going back to like ultimately helping that anonymous, marketer that asked the question.
Yeah. And Nick, another thing I wanted to ask you about is I've gotten so many positive reviews on the Anonymous Marketer for this like slight tweak that we did for the way the conversation happens. It was not an interview necessarily with you and Amanda Natividad or whomever it is that you were talking to. And I think that's really what people are going for in a podcast, right? I hear it all the time. People are like, I just want it to be conversational. I don't want it to feel like an interview. And we make this slight tweak where at the beginning you're tackling questions and you delve all into a variety of things as the episode goes on. But someone actually, one of the strategists on our staff recently said to me, and I have the quote here, is there's a mindset where people think entertainment is the only way to capture attention. And it was one of my favorite things about the Anonymous Marketer is that we didn't necessarily have this feeling of like, we need to go crazy above and beyond, but we did this one little thing that people weren't doing and it really grabbed people. So what's your view on the idea that, we didn't ask Nick Bennett to go out there like, hey, Nick, I need you to be like hilarious, or I need you to rap, or I need you to do something. And I know you've done these things before, but in this show, you've talked about it being educational in nature. And that's what it was. It was very educational, but it was fun in its own way of being slightly different. So what's your view on, if I pull that back up, so what's your view on the mindset where people think entertainment is the only way to capture attention?
Yeah, man, I think there's other ways as well. It's just going back to like the conversational piece. Like if you listen to people that maybe, you see on social media, you enjoy their content, you follow their journey and you listen to their podcast of two people that maybe you followed them for years and like you're just listening to two people have a conversation that's like very much like, hey, what can we do to help someone else? And it was, tactical stuff too. It was real life examples. Sometimes it got vulnerable. Like, I remember Kaylee Edmondson when she was on like talking about layoffs, like she mentioned like 98% of the time it has nothing to do with the individual. It's a business decision and ultimately thing. And like some people just need to like hear those types of things because especially in tech, like with all the layoffs that are happening, people think it's about them. But I can tell you, I've been laid off now 3 times. I've laid off people, unfortunately, multiple times. It's like, it's never about the people. Like I still love these people, but like ultimately it's a business decision that I probably don't even have. Like it's way above my pay grade anyways. So it's the ability to have those conversations that are real, that are open, that are transparent. And I think that provides a ton of education that isn't always entertainment, but still helps people in its own way.
And to me, that was the thing that I really loved about the show the most, was that people found that when they listened to it, they had the ability to connect with you and with your guests, and they could see themselves, whether they were experiencing the same situation in the moment or not, that they were learning about how other people in very similar situations were dealing with those issues or those things that come up that people have questions about, which I think inherently is the goal of content marketing, is to help the people who are in those roles. And for you, it's, the B2B marketer that has these questions. And it was really cool to see, in my opinion, how people were able to really relate to this content, enjoy this content without you having to do anything that was overly, if you're listening to radio this morning, all about like the word shtick, like that was overly shticky. It wasn't like you guys trying to go out there and recreate the wheel, but yet with a slight tweak, people really felt like you were talking to them. And I just thought that was a really cool thing about the show and something that we're going to keep around. I think the next thing that we wanted to ask you about was, in April of this year, you had twins and you also left Air Meat. So there was a lot going on, but you came out on the other side with a new venture. So what was that process like?
Yeah, unfortunately being laid off again, it was something where, honestly, I didn't even expect it. I felt like what I brought to a company was so valuable because of like my network, and ultimately everyone is replaceable, doesn't matter. And I was like, my boss, who was the CMO of Airme, Mark Killens, was like, you know what? He was the one that laid me off. He gave me a heads up and I knew it was coming, but he was like, I don't plan on sticking around. He's like, would you ever be open to like starting a business together? And I was like, oof, I don't know if this is a good time, to be honest. I just had like twins, like I have like 3 kids now. I got bills to pay. And he's like, no, trust me. He's like, with our networks, like, I think that we could seriously pull this off. And we had a very much the same belief system of this whole people first, go to market. And like, we kind of have rolled it out. I mean, he was at HubSpot, Drift, Airmeet. I did it at, PlanGrid, Clary, Alice, Airmeet. So like, we had kind of the same mentality without knowing we were doing it. And so I was like, you know what? I was talking to my wife and I was like, I think I'm going to go start a business. And she was like, are you serious? Like, do you think this is a good time? And I was like, if it doesn't work, I feel like I have a big enough network that I could go find another job. And I was like, even if I go take another job now, what's to say 5 to 6 months down the road, I don't get laid off again? I mean, it's you never know. And it doesn't seem like the economy is getting any better. It looks like interest rates are going back up. So as much as people say 2024 is going to be like a game changer year for tech, I still don't 100% believe that, which is unfortunate. But who knows? Hopefully someone proves me wrong.
And great proof in the pudding. You mentioned that, in many cases when people are laid off, it's a business decision. The guy who laid you off literally wanted to start a business with you.
Exactly. And so we started TACK. So it's a media and marketing firm. We do, we have a membership experience. We have marketing services, but it's gone well. It's been 4 months so far. And, we've got 10 clients right now, got 150 members in the community. It's funny enough. I mean, it's like you see all these layoffs and it's like B2B companies are outsourcing more to like people like Mark and I now because they don't have the ability to bring on headcount, but they still need this stuff done. And so we've been fortunately very, very successful really, really quickly. And hopefully we just kind of continue that. But it's been a great learning experience for someone that's never personally started a business before. I know we've talked about this before of like, Tristan's like, you got to get out there and you got to just do it. And I think after doing it and after fortunately seeing these results, like I'm very happy that I did and I wish I did it sooner.
Yeah, Nick, I remember some of those Slack messages back and forth when you were trying to figure out like, is this the right time? And I know with the twins, recently in your life, it's like, this seems like the worst time to do this sort of thing. But I remember back, I recalled the time that I made that leap, several years ago, but it was when my wife was pregnant with our first baby. And a lot of people thought I was crazy, at that time. They're like, we have your newborn's coming, she's on the way. And now you're just kind of like changing everything in your career. But for some reason, it just felt like the right time. It's kind of like this, sixth sense that you have. And I was wondering, like, when was that moment where you were like, I'm not going to look for another job right now. I'm going to actually create one. When did that time happen?
Yeah. So I actually had the idea. So before I went to Airmeet and when I was leaving Alice, I was like, I think this is the time to like go and do it. And I remember grabbing dinner with Mark back in October of 2022. And he was like, hey, I'm the CMO of this new company. He's like, the space, being a traditional field marketer. Like I've done thousands of events. He's like, the space. He's like, would you be open to coming here? And I was like, I don't know. I was kind of like thinking of going off, like, just wanted to be a full-time creator and like do cool stuff. But I was like, you know what? I'm open. He basically pitched it to me as like, I could create this like creator studio ultimately. And we had a lot of like cool ideas. And I was like, all right, you know what? Like, just because I know the space, is it a bit of a risk? Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, what isn't these days? And so I did it. And 6 months in, I get laid off. And I'm just like, you know what? Because I was talking to other companies at the time. When I found out I was getting laid off, I reached out to a few people that I knew and I was like, hey, would you be open to creating a role for me? I was like, what I'm looking for is not like a regular type of like job that you would find. I want to do like creator evangelism, be the face of the brand, go out, speak at events. And that's not like, you would have to create basically a job for me. And there was a few companies that were open to the idea. But then when Mark basically told me he was planning on leaving as well, and he's like, he laid out the vision of what he believed, like before we even knew the company was going to be called TACK, like he laid out the vision of what he thinks we could do. And he had very much that like CMO, VP audience. I had really the practitioner audience. So I feel like we covered it pretty well. Now I was like, you know what? Like just because, and again, this was my first time ever working with him, but I knew him from his Drift days. I knew him from his HubSpot days. And I was like, he has a huge network. And I was like, people really respect him. So I was like, I'm willing to try. And one, I felt flattered that like, a CMO would come to me and be like, hey, I want to create something with you. He could have gone to anyone else. And it was just at that point where I was like, you know what? Like, life's too short. I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. I was like, you always hear those stories online. It's like, I went out and started a business and now I'm a billionaire like 10 years later or something like that. And it was just like, why am I working for someone else, making them money and ultimately putting like my livelihood in like their hands? Because again, what's to say, like, I could be the top producer in the company in marketing. They still cut me. It doesn't matter. And I could just go and find job after job. But at that point, it's like, why can't I just do this myself? I built up a big enough network over the last 3.5 years that hopefully if I did something wrong, like I have a network to support me. And the network definitely showed up. So.
And what was it like when you got that first contract signed when you were out on your own?
I remember it was literally like 2 weeks into unofficially doing it, because Mark was still at Airmeet at the time, finishing up. And like, I was like on my first month of like severance, and like we signed them, and I was like, oh wow, this is amazing. And then I realized that like we charged too little and we basically gave them too much. And again, lesson learned. We never did this before. And it was like, wow, like we could have charged way more. But it was so exciting. I was like, wow, at least I have money for the next 6 months. And then they just kind of like started to come in. And like once we hit August, we launched officially on August 1st. It kind of just took off from there. And like I said, we've got 10 retainer clients right now. We have another 5 that should be signing in the next 2 weeks or so. And we built this whole like crew model. So it's like on demand, go to market services ultimately, but it's been really, really successful. So
we all know that it's not all roses, right? When you start. So I know you got some momentum here, but what has been the hardest thing about going off on your own?
Yeah. Figuring out like how to like manage your day has been very, very tricky for me. Like I've always been the type, again, working for like one company. It's like, you got your schedule, you know what you're supposed to do. You kind of do your meetings and all that. Like, I feel like now working, like we're in like the different clients, like their Slack groups, we're in their emails, we're in their project management software. Like I struggle with being able to plan my day and being able to plan it effectively, because what happens is I sit in so many meetings and it's just like, I don't get anything done. Like when's the time for like deep work? And so I made a post about this recently of like, how do people actually like plan their day? And actually a lot of people gave fantastic advice, which I plan on implementing some of those. But again, it's early for us. It's month 4 and Mark does a good job of it. He's very much, he blocks things out. I just kind of like tackle project to project as I go throughout like each and every day.
Yeah. And one thing you said earlier that I will not take credit for any of your successes, Nick, but that I do really am very passionate about the Marketers in Demand media brand that we've built is, you did a really good job of getting out there on LinkedIn, really creating your voice, starting from field marketing, getting into more on the personal brand side, and then now, that pivoting as words and the marketing evolve, now more into like the creator side of things. But, I think one of the things, and I'm just curious your thoughts on it, that I really think that the podcast or having something outside of just social media is that legitimization of you as a professional, being able to go to your wife and say, no matter what happens, I think based on my network, based on the things that I've created over time, my voice being out there within the B2B marketing community, that I'll always be able to have a job. And how do you think that being active not only on social media, but also within podcasting and within communities has had a big impact on where you are today?
I mean, I think it goes to showcase like how you think, how your mind works. It's like, when I go to hire people, the first thing that I do is I go check their LinkedIn profile. Are they actually creating content? Or are they commenting on other people's stuff? Because you can see like what they're passionate about, what they talk about, how their mind actually works in solving problems. And I don't even look at their resume. I look at their name. And again, that's like the first thing that I do. And that was always something to me. Like I never want to use a resume again. And now it's at the point where like, I don't want to ever apply to a job again, which is nice to hopefully say for the long term. But it's just, again, but it's consistency. So many people drop off over time. And again, I've pivoted over what I've talked about over the course of the years? And like, do I talk as much about marketing now? I mean, I sprinkle in some stuff, but I feel like I'm at a point now where people follow me for me. Where I could say the sky is blue, and there's weirdly going to still be people that like it, even knowing it has no value whatsoever. But I mean,
I've seen some of your posts that are still the same posts that I saw from you 4 years ago.
But I mean, it's taken almost 4 years to get to that point, though.
So with that, and with you talking a little bit less about marketing and more about the creator economy, when did you realize that it was time to move on from the anonymous marketer?
Yeah, I felt like it was something where I wanted to kind of, replicate what you guys were doing of building a media network. I mean, owned media, we know is important in today's world. LinkedIn could disappear. TikTok could disappear. What about all those audiences that you have? I mean, yeah, you could build an email list, but owned media is still like where it's at in today's world. And so part of TACK, we were like, we want to build a media network ultimately. And that's now kind of like propelled into being able to, one, build out a brand new show, going back to like what I'm passionate about, like this whole creator economy. So many people in B2B want to work with creators, want to work with influencers, but they don't know how to get started. And again, I think we're going to see mass adoption over the next like 2 years or so. And so it's like, as a B2B brand, how do you lead at the front, being able to take these strategies and activating them? And so going to be launching that and some other stuff as well. But I'm excited to be able to, bring it under the umbrella of TACK and like, obviously still, appreciate everything that you guys have done and everything that we've been able to accomplish. But I think it was time to be able to go off and like, I'm writing a book, as you know, on the creator economy. I have the newsletter that's around the creator economy. Everything, like, I think the anonymous marketer is still a brilliant idea. For me, I'm more passionate about like the creator side of things. And like, it just ties into the larger piece of what I'm doing.
And when we had that conversation, it was, we're going to see you, kick you out of the nest and see you spread your wings. And we're excited to see your new show. And, with that, we've identified the host for the show for Anonymous Marketer. It's going to continue. And that was something we really wanted to have. And we talked to you about as well, was wanting to have that next host in place before ever making any sort of announcements. Because in many cases like this, shows they revolve so heavily around someone like yourself, and you're going to be hard to replace. And we wanted to make sure that we went out and did that before hopefully he would leave our side. So with that, we have Kirsty Lang is going to be taking over as the host of the show. She's a content writer at Buffer, which many people who listen to this show probably know, which is a social media management platform. And I think, Kirsty's going to be able to give the audience a new perspective on the anonymous questions because she comes from more of a content background, which, you create a lot of content these days, but I know you came from more of the field marketing background. But based on your experience as the host of the show, what advice would you offer Kirsty as she takes the show forward?
I would say just don't lose the conversational aspect of it, going back to like the education piece of it. Like, it's not about the right or the wrong answer. It's about starting a conversation for the community. And I think that's an important piece that you don't want to lose, because it's like, people are going to turn to this as a great way. And who knows, I will probably have some anonymous questions that I want to submit. And there's things that I've been, coming across that like, again, where do I turn? So I would say just don't lose the conversational nature of that. And don't be afraid to like stand for something and like, just kind of, not be afraid to like take one side, like just stay non-biased.
Awesome. Well, I will wipe the tears out of my eyes. That's all we have for today, Nick. I'll be excited to see you launch your new show, and let's plan to have you back on as a guest at some point.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks for checking out this episode of The Anonymous Marketer. For more episodes, check us out wherever you get your favorite podcasts, or visit us on the web at motionagency.io/anonymous. And finally, this show is produced by Motion, a done-for-you podcast agency for small, scrappy B2B tech marketers. To learn how you can launch and grow a podcast for your company, visit motionagency.io.